Yuna's fingers trembled as she adjusted the final connection. The air in the small communications bunker smelled of dust and fear. Outside, the deep hum of Gresk energy weapons shook the ground. Another part of her city was turning to ash. The Melodians were not fighters. Their world was gentle, with soft pink grass and trees that sang in the wind. They built libraries, not weapons. They composed symphonies, not war chants. For 1,000 years, peace was their only song. Now, the Gresk were here. They were a hard species, from a hard world. They saw beauty and wanted to break it. They saw resources and wanted to take them. The Melodian pleas for mercy were met with silent, brutal force. Their requests for help from the Galactic Concord were answered with slow, polite messages of regret. No one would come. No one wanted to fight the Gresk. Yuna was an archivist. Her job was to preserve memories. Now, she was preparing to send out the last one. A young runner, his face streaked with dirt, stumbled into the bunker. "The eastern shield is down," he gasped. "They will be here in minutes." Yuna nodded, her heart a heavy stone in her chest. "Go. Help evacuate the children to the caves." Alone, she looked at the old machine. It was a relic, a piece of technology from a different age. It sent signals on a low-frequency band, a band no one used anymore. It was slow and simple. Centuries ago, it was discovered that only one species listened to that forgotten channel. A species that had scared the galaxy so badly in a single, brief meeting that everyone agreed to never speak of them again. A species from a nightmare world of extreme gravity, poisonous plants, wild weather, and predators that never stopped hunting. The Deathworlders. Humans. They were a story parents told to quiet their young. A myth. They came from a planet called Earth, a place the stories described as a beautiful, terrifying monster. After their first contact, where they proved to be frighteningly strong and resilient, they had simply vanished. They built a wall of silence around their star system, Sol. The galaxy was happy to forget them. To send a signal to them was not an act of hope. It was an act of final, poetic despair. It was sending a whisper into a deep, dark well, not expecting an answer, but wanting your echo to exist somewhere before the end. Yuna typed the simple message. It was not a detailed call for help. It was data. Raw, honest, terrible data. Coordinates of her world. Visual feeds of the Gresk ships cutting through their blue skies. Audio of the screams from the bombardment. The falling towers. The burning libraries. The silent, still bodies in the singing grass. She titled the data packet with 3 simple letters. So as her finger hovered over the send key. Outside, the explosions were closer. The ceiling rained fine dust on her console. She thought of her sister's children, hiding in the dark. She thought of the song trees burning. She pressed the button. The machine whirred to life, a deep, low pulse that she felt in her bones. It was sending the desperate cry of her people out into the cold, empty dark, aimed at the most feared and forgotten corner of the galaxy. It was a message in a bottle, thrown into a sea of stars, addressed to monsters. The transmission finished. The machine powered down with a quiet sigh. Yuna sat in the sudden silence, broken only by the distant thunder of war. No pride filled her. No hope. Only a deep, hollow sadness. She had just told the universe how her civilization died. She had sent their death song to the creatures of fable. She stood, smoothing her simple robes. Her work was done. The archivist's final duty was complete. The memory was sent. Now, there was only the waiting for the end. She walked to the bunker entrance and looked out at her dying world. The sky was stained with ugly black smoke. She did not look for ships in the sky. She did not dream of rescue. The Deathworlders were a ghost story, and ghost stories do not come to save you. She simply waited, a quiet figure amidst the roar, the last keeper of a memory now floating between the stars, a whisper sent to the void. Admiral Park Ji-hun floated in the quiet of his observation deck. Below him, the dark, icy rock of Pluto stretched out. Beyond it, the sun was just a very bright star in the endless black. Here, at the very edge of the solar system, everything was cold and silent. His station, anchored to Pluto's moon Charon, was not beautiful. It was a collection of gray metal, massive docks, and sharp angles. It was a shipyard, but not for merchant ships or explorer vessels. This was a place for building and maintaining warships. Ji-hun sipped his cold coffee. His face in the reflection of the window was tired. He was a man who had trained for a war that never came. His whole life had been preparation. His father's life and his grandfather's life too. For over a century, since humanity's first and only contact with the wider galaxy, this had been their purpose. That first contact had not gone well. The human explorers were strong, tough, and frightening to the aliens they met. The aliens, in turn, saw humanity as creatures from a terrifying world. They called Earth a death world. The talks broke down. There were threats. Humanity looked at the stars and saw not friends, but potential predators. So, they made a choice. They turned away. They poured every resource, every ounce of genius into one project: survival. They built the Armada. They did not build it to conquer. They built it to ensure that no one would ever think of attacking their home. It was a shield, but a shield made of countless sharp edges. And then they went quiet. They closed their borders and watched. Ji-hun's job was to watch the oldest and least used communication bands. It was boring work. Most days, nothing happened. It was a duty passed down through generations, a ritual almost everyone thought was pointless. A soft chime sounded in his ear. "Admiral," a calm voice said. It was Lieutenant Kim Tae-min, his operations officer. "We have an anomaly, a low-frequency pulse, repeating. It's on the legacy band, the old SOS channel." "Unbreakable." The SOS channel. That was from the earliest days of space travel. No one used it anymore. "Origin. It's from outside the system, sir. Very far. It's a data packet. A big one. It's tagged with a location and a species identifier. The Melodians." Ji-hun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. He knew that name from the old briefings. A peaceful species. Artists. He stood up. "Send it to my secure screen. Now." Back in his command chair, the data flooded his screen. First, there was silence. Then images. He saw a world of gentle colors. He saw graceful buildings. He saw people with large, kind eyes making music. Then the image shook. Dark, brutal-looking ships filled the sky. Energy beams, colored a sickly green, cut down from above. The beautiful buildings exploded. The people ran. He could hear their cries, high sounds of pure terror. He saw the grass burn. The data showed everything. The attacking ships, Gresk, the system identified. The total collapse of Melodian defenses. The systematic destruction of cities. It was not a battle. It was an eradication. Ji-hun's hands, usually steady, tightened into fists. His jaw clenched. He watched for 10 straight minutes, his face becoming like stone. Here was the reason. Here was the very thing his grandfather had feared, his father had trained for, and he had waited for. Not an attack on Earth, but a horror happening to someone else. A small, defenseless someone else. Taemin's voice was quiet over the comm. "Sir. The signal is repeating. It's the only thing coming from those coordinates now. Other channels are silent. They've been wiped off their own communications," Ji-hun said, his voice low. "This is a final broadcast. A message in a bottle." He leaned back, staring at the frozen image on his screen. A child's toy, broken in the street of an alien city. The law was clear. Protocol Heimdall. The protocol for verified external genocide. It gave the fleet admiral authority to mobilize the Armada for defensive humanitarian intervention. It had never been used. It was a theory in a manual. He opened a channel. A simple, direct line to Earth. To the Prime Minister, Lee Soo-jin. Her face appeared on the screen. She looked calm, but her eyes were sharp. "Admiral Park, this is an unexpected call." "Madam Prime Minister," Ji-hun said, "I am sending you a data packet. You need to see it. I believe Protocol Heimdall has been triggered." He sent the files. On his screen, he watched as she viewed the same horrors he had. He saw her composure crack. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, filled with a hard light. "This is the Gresk?" she asked. "Yes. And the Melodians. They sent this to us? Specifically? On the old band, ma'am. The one only we monitor. They knew no one else would listen. Or they had nowhere else to turn." Prime Minister Lee was silent for a long time. She looked not at Ji-hun, but at something far away. "They sent their death song to the monsters under the bed," she whispered. Then she focused, her voice becoming firm. "Admiral Park Ji-hun, activate Protocol Heimdall. Begin full mobilization of the Terran Soul Defense Fleet. I will convene the Global Council. We will send them our answer." The line went dead. Ji-hun took a deep breath. The silent, waiting years were over. He switched his comm to fleet-wide. "All stations, all commands. This is Admiral Park. Authentication code Heimdall Alpha 9. Execute Protocol Heimdall. I repeat, execute Protocol Heimdall. Prepare the Armada for immediate deployment. Across the dark shipyards of Charon, and then across the solar system, from the yards of Mars to the deep space anchorages near Jupiter, lights began to blaze on. A sleeping giant, nestled in its cradle of ice and rock, was opening its eyes. Prime Minister Lee Soo-jin stood alone in her private office, high above Seoul. The city lights glittered below, a picture of peaceful order. On her large wall screen, the silent images from Admiral Park played on a loop. The burning grass, the falling towers, the fear in the Melodians' large eyes. She had watched it 3 times. The first time for the horror, the second time for the details, the third time to harden her resolve. A soft chime announced the secure connection was ready. She smoothed her jacket and sat down. With a touch, her wall became a mosaic of faces. The Global Defense Council. 11 men and women from every major power on Earth. Their faces, seen on small screens in her office, were serious. They had all seen the data. "Thank you for joining on such short notice." Soo-jin began, her voice clear and calm. "You have seen what Admiral Park has sent. The Melodian civilization is being destroyed. They have asked for help. They asked us." General Kim Tae-min's face was on one screen. He was still on Sharon Station, standing beside Admiral Park. He spoke first. "The Gresk military capability is significant, but it is conventional. Their technology is based on plasma and particle beams. Our analysis shows our shielding can withstand it. Our point defense systems can negate their projectiles." A council member from Europa, an older man named Laurent, shook his head. "General, that is not the question. The question is, should we? We built the Armada to protect Earth, to ensure our survival. This is not our fight. If we intervene, we break a century of isolation. We become a target. Every species in the Galactic Concord will see us as the monsters of legend, now on the move." A woman from the Pacific Alliance, May, leaned forward. "Laurent is right about the risk. But look at the data. This is not a war. It is a slaughter. The Galactic Concord is doing nothing. If we have the power to stop this, what does it mean if we choose not to use it?" The debate began. It was not loud, but it was intense. Some argued from fear. Revealing their strength could start a panic. Could unite other species against them. They had peace. Why risk it for strangers? Others argued from strategy. Showing their power now for a moral reason could prevent future conflicts. It could establish a new rule. Genocide would not be tolerated. Soo-jin listened, her hands folded on the desk. She let them talk. They needed to say these things. Finally, the representative from the African Union, Kofi, spoke. His voice was deep and slow. "We have spent generations living with a secret. We are the strongest. We built the biggest weapons. But we told ourselves it was only for defense. It was to make sure no one would hurt us. But defense of what? Only our soil? Or is it the defense of an idea? The idea that the strong should not crush the weak just because they can." The room quieted. Soo-jin saw the shift. The talk was moving from fear to duty. General Kim Tae-min spoke again. "Madam Prime Minister, Council members, the Armada is ready. The crews have trained for this their entire lives. Not for conquest, but for this exact moment, to stand between a threat and those who cannot stand for themselves. If we do not go, then what was it all for? We are not just a weapon in a box. We are a choice. Sujin nodded slowly. She looked at each face on her screen. For over 100 years, she said, we have defined ourselves by what we were afraid of. We saw the galaxy as a dark forest, full of predators. We became the most dangerous thing in that forest to be left alone. She pointed to the frozen image on the main screen. A Melodian child, covered in dust, staring at nothing. But they did not send their signal to a predator. They sent it to the only ones listening. They are not asking the monster to save them. They are sending their final words into the dark, hoping that someone, anyone, is there. We are there. She stood up. We did not build the Armada to hide forever. We built it to have a choice when a moment like this came. We can choose to stay safe in our silence and let a song end forever. Or we can choose to answer. She looked around the virtual room. I am calling for a vote. Do we authorize the deployment of the Terran Soul Defense Fleet under Protocol Heimdall for the purpose of humanitarian intervention and the cessation of hostilities against the Melodian people? One by one, the votes came in. Yes, yes. YS.IT was unanimous. Sujin sat back down. Thank you. General Kim, inform Admiral Park. He is authorized to proceed. Send the Melodians a message. Let them know they are not alone. On Sharon Station, Admiral Park received the order. He turned to his communications officer. Send it. On the same frequency they used. The officer typed. The message was short, contained no grand promises. Nosrets. Just 5 words, translated into simple mathematical code and sent racing back along the path of the Deathworlders. In her bunker, Yuna would not hear it yet. The message was still crossing the vast, star-filled dark. But it was coming. The words were, hold on. Help is coming. The silence of a century was broken. Yuna walked through the ruins of her city. The song trees were blackened skeletons. The air tasted of smoke and bitter chemicals. She moved slowly, her energy gone. The last groups of survivors were heading to the deep mountain caves. It was the final refuge, a place to wait for the end. The Gresk advance was methodical. They did not rush. They were cleaning up. Their heavy walkers, like metal beetles, crushed the beautiful paved streets. Their soldiers in dark armor went from building to building. They were not looking for people anymore. They were taking things. Art, instruments, cultural records. They were erasing the Melodians from the universe and taking souvenirs. Yuna found herself at the broken steps of the Grand Library. She had worked here her whole life. Now its dome was shattered, and the gentle glow from 1,000,000 knowledge crystals was dark. She sat on the steps, feeling the cold stone. This was where it would end. She would not go to the caves. She wanted to be here. High above, in the cold silence of space, the Gresk command ship hung like a fat, ugly spider. On its bridge, the Gresk commander watched the final report scroll across his screen. His name was Forlak, but no one used it. He was Victory Forlak now. This conquest was almost complete. Easy. Weak species were the best kind. A junior officer approached. Commander, we detected a low-power signal from the planet's surface a few cycles ago. An old frequency. It seems to have been a final distress call. Forlak made a rough, grating sound that was his laugh. Let them call. Who will hear them? The Concord is silent. Let them die with the hope that someone heard their little song. It makes their end more amusing. On the other side of the galaxy, a different fleet was moving. Admiral Park Ji-hun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Munsu. The bridge was quiet, lit by soft blue lights. Crew members spoke in low voices. Screens showed lines of data and complex star maps. Outside the main window was not the blackness of space, but a swirling tunnel of impossible colors. They were in the slipstream, moving faster than light. Captain Choi Hae-won stood beside him. She was younger than the admiral, with a calm, focused face. Her ship, the Munsu, was a spearhead. It was long and gray with no decoration. It was built for one thing: status of the fleet. Ji-hun asked. Hae-won checked her panel. All 10,000 vessels are in formation and holding the slipstream corridor, Admiral. Engines are at optimal. Weapons and shields are at full readiness. We will arrive at the Melodian system in approximately 6 hours. 10,000 ships. The number was hard to understand. It was not just warships. There were carriers, medical frigates, engineering vessels, and massive dreadnoughts like the Munsu. It was an entire civilization's military might, moving as one. What is our final approach? Ji-hun asked. We will exit the slipstream at the edge of their system, Hae-won said. Beyond the orbit of their furthest gas giant. We will then make a final short jump to their inner system. This will give us a tactical view and allow us to broadcast our arrival. Ji-hun nodded. They had planned this for generations. Every move was practiced. But the plans had always been about defending Earth. This was different. They were crossing the stars to a strange world, to fight for someone else on the surface. Yuna looked up at the sky. The Gresk ships were like black spots against the stars. She wondered if her signal was still out there, traveling. She thought of the humans. The stories said they had fists like rocks and could survive terrible wounds. They were said to be from a world of constant danger. She tried to imagine them, but all she saw in her mind were monsters from children's tales. They did not come. Of course they did not. She closed her eyes and hummed an old melody, a lullaby. It was all she had left out on the Gresk command ship. Forlak was drinking a thick, bitter liquid. His officer approached again, looking slightly confused. Commander, long-range sensors are picking up a disturbance. In the outer system, a massive energy signature. It is like nothing in our records. Forlak waved a hand. A comet cluster. A sensor ghost. Do not bother me. It is getting closer, sir. In the slipstream, Captain Hae-won watched the countdown. 30 seconds to exit, she said. Sound battle stations, Admiral Ji-hun said, his voice quiet. But do not power weapons. Not yet. A low, gentle alarm sounded through the Munsu. Crew members settled into their chairs. Harnesses clicked. Everyone was calm. They had done this simulation 10,000 times. Exiting now, Hae-won said. The swirling colors outside the window collapsed. The blackness of normal space returned. And there, hanging in it, was the Melodian star, a bright yellow point in the distance. On the Gresk ship, alarms began to scream. The officer's voice was shrill. Commander, the energy signature. It just appeared inside the system. It's a fleet, an enormous fleet. Forlak stood up, his drink forgotten. Whose? What Concord species? It's not a Concord signature, sir. The profiles do not match any known species. The energy readings, they are off the scale. On the bridge of the Munsu, Admiral Ji-hun looked at the tactical screen. It showed the Gresk fleet around the small blue-green planet. He saw their positions, their strength. He saw the planet, wounded and bleeding. Open a channel, he said. Broadcast it on every frequency. Wideband. I want the Gresk, the Melodians, and anyone else listening to hear this. The officer nodded. Channel open, sir. Ji-hun took a breath. His voice would be the first human voice this part of the galaxy had heard in over a century. It had to be clear. It had to be absolute. Gresk forces. This is Admiral Park Ji-hun of the Terran Sol Defense Fleet. You are engaged in the annihilation of a defenseless species. You will power down all weapons and surrender command of your fleet, effective immediately. You have 1 hour to comply. He paused, letting the words hang in the electronic silence. This is your only warning. On the bridge of the Gresk command ship, there was a moment of total silence. The officers stared at their screens. Then they looked at Commander Forlak. His face, behind his helmet's visor, turned a darker shade of green. He made that rough, grating sound again. It started as a laugh but twisted into something angry. Terran Sol Defense Fleet? He spat the words. What is a Terran? Where is their system? This is a trick. A Melodian trick using old ghost stories. He slammed a fist on his console. They have 1 ship? 2? They hide in the outer system and make big noises. Ignore them. Continue the ground advance. Wipe out the last pockets. The officer who had spoken before did not move. He was still staring at his sensor screen. His voice was a whisper. Commander, it is not one ship. The sensors show 10,000 individual contacts. Minimum. They are forming a spherical blockade around the entire inner system. They are everywhere. Forlak's confidence cracked. 10,000?
Impossible.
No species fields a fleet that size for an intervention. Show me. The main screen flickered. A tactical map of the system appeared. The blue-green dot of the Melodian world was surrounded by a cloud of small, red Gresk icons. But now, at the edge of the map, was a wall of solid, bright white dots. They were so numerous they looked like a ring of dust around a star. And they were moving inward. They are not answering, Captain Hay-1 said on the bridge of the Munsu. Her eyes were on the clock. 50 minutes had passed since the Admiral's warning. Admiral Park Ji-hun sat in his command chair, perfectly still. He had hoped they would listen. He had hoped the show of force would be enough. He watched the Gresk signals. They were not powering down. Instead, their formations were shifting. The Gresk fleet was breaking orbit, turning to face the new threat. Their energy signatures spiked as they powered weapons. They are choosing to fight, Ji-hun said, his voice heavy. He did not want this, but he knew it would happen. All vessels, execute Protocol Guardian. Defensive engagement only. Priority 1, protect the planet. Priority 2, disable Gresk capability. Do not destroy unless necessary. The orders flowed out. Across 10,000 human ships, lights changed from blue to a soft, amber standby on the surface. Yuna heard the hum of the Gresk walkers change pitch. They were turning away from the city, their guns lifting toward the sky. She looked up. What was happening? In space, the Gresk fleet surged forward. They fired first. A storm of green plasma bolts and bright particle beams shot across the void toward the human line. It was a terrifying display of firepower, enough to burn a world to cinders. The human fleet did not scatter. It did not return fire. Instead, every human ship shimmered. A faint, hexagonal pattern of blue light flickered into existence around each vessel for a split second as the Gresk fire struck. The plasma bolts splashed against the energy shields and vanished. The particle beams refracted away harmlessly. The entire devastating barrage was absorbed and negated without a single human ship moving an inch. The silence that followed on the Gresk bridge was deafening. Shields at 100%, Hay-1 reported calmly, as if commenting on the weather. Point defense systems, active, Ji-hun said. Now, the human fleet moved. It was not a charge. It was a slow, deliberate advance. As they moved, small ports opened along their hulls. From these ports came thousands of tiny, fast-moving projectiles. They were not explosive. They were simple, dense rods of metal, fired with incredible speed and perfect accuracy. They streaked through the Gresk formation. They did not aim for engines or reactors. They aimed for weapon barrels, sensor arrays, and shield projectors. They were like a swarm of precise, angry bees on the Gresk ships. Alarms screamed of a different kind. Weapons system offline. Shield generator disabled. Main engines hit. Thrust reduced to 10%. A Gresk cruiser, larger than the others, launched a full spread of missiles toward a human medical frigate. Before the missiles had traveled halfway, brilliant white lasers from 3 different human destroyers lanced out. Each missile was pinpointed and vaporized in a tiny, silent flash. Forlak watched his main screen. His mighty fleet was being dismantled. Ship by ship, system by system, they were being turned into powerless, drifting hulks. Not one had exploded. Not one life pod had been ejected. His forces were being surgically disarmed. Return fire. Full barrage. Target their lead ship, he screamed. His weapons officers tried, but their consoles flashed red. They had no fire control. Their ships were blind and toothless. On the ground. Yuna saw it. The Gresk walkers had stopped moving. Their weapon arms had gone limp. From the east, she heard a new sound. A deep, rhythmic thumping in the air, like a giant heartbeat. She turned. Coming over the broken towers were hundreds of small, sleek shapes. They were not Gresk. They were angular and gray. They fell from the sky on pillars of blue fire, landing not on top of buildings, but in the open streets between the advancing Gresk ground troops and the mountain caves where her people hid. The thumping stopped. The dust cleared. Standing in a perfect, unbroken line between the killers and the survivors were soldiers. They were tall, encased in smooth, gray-green armor that seemed to drink the light. They held large, blocky rifles, but the barrels were pointed at the ground. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply stood there. A Gresk soldier, confused and angry, raised his plasma rifle and fired at the closest human. The green bolt struck the human's chest plate. There was no scorch mark. The armor didn't even glow. The human soldier's helmet tilted slightly, looking at the Gresk who had fired. The human did not raise its own weapon. It just continued to stand, an unmovable wall. The message was clear. The advance ended here. Una stood up on the library steps, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a feeling she had forgotten. Oh, the monsters from the stories had come. But they were not tearing the world apart. They were holding the line. They had heard her whisper, and they had answered with a silent, undeniable truth. In the sky above, the last Gresk ship's engines flickered and died. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over. The silence that fell over the Melodian world was not empty. It was full of the echo of what had just happened. The deep hum of Gresk ships was gone, replaced by the low, steady thrum of human engines holding position in the high atmosphere. On the ground, the only sounds were the crackle of distant fires and the wind through the broken trees. Una could not take her eyes off the line of human soldiers. They stood like statues made of stone and steel, 50 meters apart, forming a barrier that stretched across the valley. The Gresk ground troops had frozen. Their walkers were dark, powerless hulks. Their soldiers stood in confused groups, weapons hanging uselessly in their hands. The humans had not fired a single shot at them. They had simply stopped them. Then, from behind the human line, new shapes moved. These were not soldiers. They were smaller, boxier vehicles painted white with a single red symbol. They floated gently over the ground, coming to a stop in the open area between the armies. Ramps lowered. Human figures emerged. They wore lighter, white armor. They carried large packs, not weapons. They moved quickly, with purpose, but their movements were not threatening. They went straight to the places where Melodian wounded lay, hidden in the rubble or carried by the last few survivors. One of them, its helmet reflecting the smoky sky, approached a group of Melodians huddled by a collapsed wall. A young Melodian child was crying, holding a burned arm. The human medic knelt. It was a slow, careful movement. It placed its large pack on the ground and opened it. With gloved hands that looked too big for delicate work, it took out a small device. A soft blue light came from the device. The human pointed it at the child's arm. The child flinched, but the Melodian adult holding them stared. The angry red burn began to fade. The skin smoothed over. The child's crying slowed to quiet sobs. Una watched, her breath caught in her throat. This was not the act of a monster. This was an act of care. On the Gresk command ship, now adrift and silent, Commander Forlax sat in his chair. His screen showed the same scene from a dozen different angles. His fleet was a field of dead metal. His ground forces were paralyzed. A human shuttle, unarmed and marked with diplomatic symbols, was docking with his ship. The bridge door opened. 2 human soldiers walked in. They were tall, their armor making them seem even larger in the cramped space. They did not point their weapons. They simply stood by the door. Behind them walked a human woman in a simple gray uniform. She had no helmet. Her black hair was tied back, and her face was calm. She was Captain Choi Hae-won. She looked at Forlax. "Commander," she said. Her voice was translated by a small device on her collar. It sounded flat, without emotion. "You have attacked a Gresk sovereign force." Forlax snarled, trying to find his old power. "This is an act of war. The Concord will..." The Galactic Concord was notified 17 minutes ago. HFY interrupted, her voice still calm. They were sent the full data packet of your actions here, provided by the Melodian archivist Una. They have acknowledged receipt. They have made no further statement. Forlac felt the last of his confidence drain away. They had been shamed, and everyone knew. We are now in control of this system. HFY continued. Your ships are disabled. Your soldiers will lay down their arms. You will be detained, processed, and returned to Gresk space under guard, where your own authorities will decide your fate for crimes of genocide. You cannot do this, Forlac shouted. We have done it, HFY said. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes. It was not hatred. It was something colder, disdain. We gave you a choice. You could have stopped. You chose not to. Now there are no more choices. She turned and left. The soldiers remained. One of them gestured to the door. Forlac stood, his body heavy with defeat, and walked out on the surface. The human medics worked. They set up mobile shelters with clean, white fabric. They brought out supplies of food and water, simple packets that could be easily opened. They did not speak much. Their actions were their language. Una finally found the courage to move. She walked down the library steps and across the broken square towards the nearest human medic. The medic was now treating an older Melodian with a leg wound. It finished sealing the wound with a bandage of soft, glowing material. The medic looked up and saw Una. It stood. Even kneeling, it had been tall. Now it seemed to tower over her. Una forced herself not to step back. She looked at the human's faceplate. She could see only her own reflection, dirty and tired. She pointed to the sky, then to the human, then placed her hand over her own heart, a Melodian gesture of profound thanks. The human medic stood perfectly still for a moment. Then, slowly, it did something. It reached up with both hands and unlocked its helmet. There was a hiss of air. It removed the helmet, tucking it under an arm. Una saw the face underneath. It was a woman. She looked young, with kind eyes and a serious mouth. She had none of the sharp teeth or fierce features of the stories. She looked tired and human. The woman offered Una a small, simple container of water. It's safe, the woman said, her voice translated softly. Please, drink. Una took the container. The water was cool and clean. It was the most ordinary, wonderful thing she had ever tasted. She looked from the human medic to the line of silent soldiers still holding back the Gresk, to the white ships helping her people in the distance. The strength of the humans was not in their weapons, which were terrifying. It was in this, the choice to use that strength to shield, to heal, and to stand between the darkness and the light. They had not come as conquerors. They had come as guardians. The monsters from the death world, Una realized, had not brought death. They had brought it to a stop. The sky over the Melodian world began to clear. The smoke from the fires slowly drifted away. The strange, beautiful color of the alien sky returned. In the streets, the silence was now a quiet buzz of activity. Human engineers in orange armor worked alongside Melodians, using gentle cutting beams to clear rubble. The white medical tents glowed softly in the twilight. Admiral Park Ji-hun stood at the edge of a landing field. It was a temporary one, set up by his people in a matter of hours. Before him, Prime Minister Lee Soo-jin's image hovered on a small comm screen. Her face was back in her office on Earth. The first wave of aid from the Concord has been approved, Soo-jin said. Food, medical supplies, construction drones. It seems our demonstration has encouraged a sudden sense of cooperation. Yi-han nodded. And the Gresk. Their government has disavowed Commander Forlac's actions. They call him a rogue element. They are accepting the return of their disarmed ships and their soldiers for trial. It is a political dance. But the message was received. Good, Ji-hun said, but his voice was flat. He looked past the screen at the work happening around him. He saw a human soldier sharing a ration bar with two Melodian children, showing them how to open it. He saw the line of silent human warships, like watchful mountains, high in orbit. You do not sound pleased, Admiral, Soo-jin observed. It was necessary, Ji-hun said. We did the right thing. But we are not heroes, Madam Prime Minister. We are a warning. We showed the galaxy that the monster under the bed is real, and that it has rules. That is a heavy thing to be. Sujin was quiet for a moment. I know. But a warning can also be a protection. For them and for us. We have shown we are not a danger to those who wish to live in peace. Only to those who would destroy peace. Sleep well, Admiral. You have given a fragile people a chance to sing again. The screen went dark. Ji-hun turned. Yuna was walking towards him. She moved with a new carefulness, like someone testing solid ground after a long time at sea. She stopped before him and gave a slow, deep bow of her head. Admiral, she said, her translator device speaking the words. My people. We have no words that are enough. Ji-hun returned a slight, formal bow. You do not need words, Archivist Yuna. You sent a message. We answered. It is simple. It is not simple, Yuna said, her large eyes holding his. You came. You had nothing to gain. You risked everything. The stories they told about you, they were wrong.
A faint, satsmile touched Yehune's lips.
The stories were not wrong about what we can do. They were only wrong about why we do it. We come from a hard world, Yuna. It made us hard. But it also taught us that the strongest must sometimes stand for the weakest. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. He gestured to the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. My people will be leaving soon. A small group will stay, liaisons, engineers, doctors, to help you rebuild. But the Armada, it must go home. Yuna felt a spike of fear. The Gresk could return. They will not, Ji-hun said, and his voice carried a quiet certainty that was more frightening than any shout. They know we will be listening, and they know how fast we can come back. Your safety is now part of our duty. That is our promise. He began to walk towards a waiting shuttle. Yuna walked beside him. What do we call you now? She asked. Not Deathworlders. That is a name given in fear. Ji-hun paused at the shuttle ramp. He thought for a moment. When a storm protects a valley from a fire, it is still a storm. Call us what you will. But know this, we built our walls high and our weapons sharp so that we could one day choose to open a gate. You showed us the gate. For that, we thank you. He boarded the shuttle. The ramp closed silently. That night, Yuna stood on the same library steps. She looked up. The human ships, one by one, were igniting their engines. They did not make a sound. They pulled away from the planet, moving like a school of silent, metallic fish. They gathered in high orbit, a constellation of cold, blue lights. Then, as one, they turned. Space itself seemed to tear open in front of them, a rift of shimmering energy. The human armada, 10,000 vessels strong, slid into the tear. It lasted only a few seconds. The rift closed. The stars returned, looking just as they had before. But everything was different. The monsters were gone. But they had left a shield of their own making, a promise, hanging in the silent dark. The galaxy had seen them. It had seen their terrifying power, and it had seen their careful mercy. It had seen that the most dangerous force in the stars had a heart and a rule, that the strong shall protect on his flagship. Back in the quiet slipstream, Admiral Park Ji-hun looked at the star map. Earth was still far away. His crew worked quietly. The great weapon was returning to its sheath. He thought of the Melodian child with the healed arm. He thought of the singing trees that would one day grow again. He felt the immense weight of the Armada around him, a weight his people would carry forever. It was not a weight of conquest. It was the weight of a choice. And for the first time in a very long time, as he sailed the silent river between the stars, Park Ji-hun felt that weight was right.